Have you ever caught yourself winning an argument against someone who isn't even there? Maybe it's an old classmate, an ex, a former boss, someone you haven't spoken to in years. You're driving to work, taking a shower, washing dishes, and suddenly they're standing there in your mind. Not physically, of course, but mentally. You're explaining yourself, defending yourself, imagining what you should have said, imagining how impressed they'd be if they saw where you are today. It's strange when you really think about it, because in that moment, you're completely alone. So, who exactly are you performing for? Most of us like to think we live for ourselves, that our decisions belong to us, that once someone leaves our life, they stop influencing it. But our minds don't always work that way. Instead, they quietly build what I'd like to call a phantom gallery, a collection of invisible observers made up of people we've known throughout our lives. Old friends, former partners, childhood rivals, parents, teachers, that one person who embarrassed us in middle school, that coworker who always seems impossible to impress. They're not actually present, though. Many of them probably haven't thought about us in years. Some may not even remember us. And yet somehow they still occupy front row seats inside our minds. But what's fascinating is that these ghost observers don't just appear during memories. They show up while we're making decisions. We wonder what they'd think if they saw our career, our relationships, our appearance, our success, even our failures. It's almost as if an invisible audience follows us around everywhere we go. And not because they're watching, but because somewhere along the way, we internalized their voices. And once that happens, they don't need to be physically present anymore. Our own minds keep the performance going. But I think that's what makes this phenomenon so interesting. It's not really about other people. It's about the audience we've unknowingly built inside ourselves. So, if these ghost observers aren't actually watching us, where did they come from? The answer, I think, is surprisingly simple. Most of them didn't begin as ghosts. They began as real people. A parent whose approval meant everything. A teacher who made one comment you never forgot. A bully who convinced you that you weren't enough. A friend who betrayed your trust. An ex who made you question your worth. A stranger who embarrassed you in public. In the moment, these interactions seem temporary, but our brains don't always treat them that way. Instead, they store them, not just as memories, but as reference points. And over time, those reference points become something much larger. They become an internal judge. And the strange thing about this judge is that it rarely sounds like us. Sometimes it sounds like a parent. Sometimes it sounds like a childhood classmate. Sometimes it sounds like someone we haven't seen in 20 years. Yet somehow these voices still show up whenever we make a mistake, or whenever we try something new, or whenever we wonder whether we're good enough. And what's fascinating is that the people themselves often move on. You know, they're living their own lives. They're worrying about their own problems. Meanwhile, we're still carrying around a version of them that exists only inside our minds. And because that version can never change, it becomes frozen in time. You know, maybe your 8th grade bully eventually became a kind, thoughtful adult. Maybe your old boss doesn't even remember criticizing you. Maybe that person who rejected you has completely forgotten the conversation. It doesn't matter. The ghost doesn't evolve. It stays exactly as you remembered it. That's what gives it so much power. We're no longer responding to reality. We're responding to a memory, a mental construction, a version of someone that our own minds keep alive. And once those internal judges take root, they quietly begin influencing decisions we don't even realize they're influencing. Not because they're speaking to us, but because we've learned to speak for them. Once these ghost observers become part of our inner world, something subtle begins to happen. We stop asking, what do I actually want? And instead we begin asking, what would they think? Sometimes we don't even notice we're doing it. We imagine someone from our past just seeing our career. We imagine an old rival hearing about our accomplishments. We imagine an ex seeing a photo we've posted online. We imagine people who haven't been part of our lives for years. And somehow they're still invited into decisions they were never meant to make. I want to be careful here. I'm not saying it's wrong to care about what other people think, because other people's opinions do matter to a degree. Family matters, friends matter, constructive criticism matters. Living in a community means we naturally consider how our actions affect the people around us. The problem isn't caring about people. It's living for an audience that isn't actually there. When our motivation shifts from doing something because we believe it's right to doing something because we're trying to prove something to a ghost, we've handed over more control than we realize. Sometimes that performance looks like success. Sometimes it looks like perfection. Sometimes it looks like constantly explaining ourselves. Sometimes it even looks like trying to become a better person. Not because we genuinely want to grow, but because we hope that somehow someone from our past would finally approve. And that's a heavy way to live, because performances don't really end. If you're always acting for an audience, you never get to leave the stage. And eventually that's exhausting. Not because pretending is difficult for a day, but because pretending for years slowly blurs the line between who you are and who you've been trying to become for someone else. At some point, a difficult question begins to surface. If nobody from my past ever saw what I'm doing today, would I still make the same choices? Would I still chase the same goals? Would I still define success the same way? Those aren't easy questions, but they're important ones. Because if the answer is no, then maybe we've spent years building a life designed to impress an audience that left theater a long time ago. If we spend enough years performing for ghost observers, something unexpected begins to happen. We slowly lose sight of the person underneath the performance. And at first, the compromises seem small. You stop saying what you really think. You become hesitant to try something new because of what they might think. You hide parts of yourself that don't fit the version you've been trying to present. None of those decisions feel life-changing on their own, but over time, they begin to stack. Eventually, you wake up one day and you realize you're no longer asking, what do I want? You're asking, what version of me would receive the most approval? And that's a very different question. One is rooted in identity, the other is rooted in performance. And I think one of the greatest freedoms a person can experience is realizing that most people aren't watching us nearly as closely as we imagine. Everyone's carrying their own worries, their own insecurities, their own invisible audience. The spotlight we think is following us often isn't really there at all. And when you begin to realize that, something remarkable happens. You begin making decisions because they align with your values instead of your fears. You stop trying to rewrite conversations that ended years ago. You stop trying to earn approval from people who may never give it. You stop treating your past like a courtroom where you're forever defending yourself. That doesn't mean forgetting the people who've shaped you. Some voices deserve to stay with us, the people who loved us well, the people who challenged us with kindness, the people who helped us grow. But not every voice deserves permanent residence in our minds. Some just belong in our memories, not at the controls of our lives. Maybe the first step isn't silencing every ghost observer. Maybe it's simply learning to notice when one has started speaking. When you catch yourself thinking, I hope they see this, or I have to prove them wrong, you can try to pause for a moment, ask yourself a simple question. Is this thought coming from the person I am today, or from someone I left behind years ago? Sometimes that single question is enough to loosen the grip that those old voices have on us. Because once we recognize them for what they are, they become much easier to let go. So, how do we begin letting go of these ghost observers? I don't think the answer is pretending they were never there. The people who shaped us, for better or worse, are always going to be part of our story. We can't erase our memories, but we can choose how much authority those memories have over the present. One practice that I found helpful is asking myself a very simple question whenever I notice myself replaying a conversation or imagining someone else's opinion. Whose voice is this? Is this actually me? Or am I borrowing the voice of someone I met years ago? And sometimes the answer is surprising. What felt like my own thought was actually an old criticism that had quietly become part of the background noise in my mind. The more we ask that question, the easier it becomes to separate our own values from someone else's expectations. And once we begin doing that, something interesting happens. Our private life starts becoming private again. We stop rehearsing imaginary conversations. We stop trying to impress people who will never see what we're doing. We stop explaining ourselves to an audience that left long ago. Instead, our attention shifts somewhere much healthier, not toward the person we used to be, not toward people we've left behind, but toward the person we're becoming, because that's the only version of ourselves we can actually shape. The past has already been written. The opinions of strangers have never truly belonged to us, but today's choices, those are still ours. And maybe that's what freedom really looks like. Not reaching a place where no one has ever criticized us, not reaching a place where every memory disappears, but reaching a place where those memories no longer decide who we become. Maybe the goal was never to silence every ghost observer. Maybe the goal is simply to stop giving them the microphone. Because once we do, we discover something we may have forgotten was possible. To think our own thoughts, to make our own decisions, to build a life that doesn't need an invisible audience. And maybe the most peaceful realization of all is that the person whose approval matters most tomorrow isn't the ghost from your past. It's the person you're becoming today. Anyway, thank you so much for tuning in. This has been another video by Hidden Observer. Hope you enjoyed. Much love. See you.